All right, you're recording now. And as soon as I get the note that we're live.
Do we have enough people to really do this?
The only one we're missing is Brandy.
Okay.
She's at the concert tonight.
Yeah, right.
So she said she wouldn't be here.
Well, it's already.
Her daughter must have called because I didn't- I didn't
It's already
hear
opened up to the church parking lot,
All right.
Yeah.
and you're gonna run that through.
Uh-huh. All right.
I know.
We'll call this December 9th meeting, planning and zoning meeting to order at 7:02. I need quiet in the gallery, please. All right, so we are called to order at 7:02. Terry, can you do roll call or you want me to do it from here?
I can do it.
All right.
Miss Williamson,
Here,
Mr. Mager,
Here.
Mr. Looney,
Here.
Mayor.
I am here.
Brandy, Miss McCreary is excused.
Yep. There is a school concert tonight. All right. So then let's go on to our agenda. And our first item should be the approval of the minutes from our last meeting, October 21st, 2021.
you want to take care of your quotation?
There is a typo on page 1. Down toward the bottom of the page says, Looney asked if he understood correctly that the barrier around the pool is different than the swimming pool itself. So it should say like different than the swimming pool itself.
All right. So,
Yeah, other than just a few typos, I have no problem at all with the minutes.
all right. So we've got that Scrivener's error to fix and then the spell check. Fair enough. Scrivener's errors, I think we can take care of
Okay.
after approval. Yeah.
Okay.
We, yours may, it's kind of Scrivener's error, kind of content. Is there?
Yeah, I thought his influenced the understanding of. his
Yeah, so we can get
statement.
that one. Are there any other content
No.
things where we have incorrect?
Couple typos.
All right. Do we then have a,
I move that we accept the minutes noting Mr. Looney's statement.
I'll second the motion.
all right, discussion on the minutes? Roll call.
Miss Williamson,
Yes,
Mr. Mager,
Yes,
Mr. Looney,
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes. All right, minutes will be approved, noting that change and obviously fixing the typos. Next agenda item is visitors. We've got some here, some online, but let me ask if there are any visitors present for anything other than the zoning district change that's the main business item tonight. All right. In that case, we will move on. We'll hit visitors after when we get to that portion. Old business, we need to schedule the swimming pools and fences, public hearings. But it's winter and we'll get to those first part of 2022, which then gets us to new business. And the number one item tonight is the zoning district change from R2 to PUD. From Act Investments and Robert Landis, and just reminder for the committee here, because we haven't done a PUD in a long time in the village. This is the first of multiple steps. Right now it's an R2, so in 17 acres. To develop it, if you wanted to put, the example I used earlier was 34 single family homes on there on half-acre lots. That's a whole lot of lot splits and a permit for each lot splitted parcel. The conversion to PUD allows it to be a platted development and account for utilities and doesn't require 34 or however many individual permits there. So tonight's item is just whether or not we're hearing on the change to the PUD. We have to have a full, public hearing on that. And then if that is granted, then they submit the plan for the development of how everything will be divided. And that's when you get into the utilities and all of that stuff. So tonight is just, does it change from R2 to PUD? And so with that, I know everybody received a copy of the map in the application, but we'll turn it over to Mr. Landis or whomever is here with them to give us a quick overview of the plan. Again, it's the zoning change, but I know a lot of the questions have to come from the community about what might come once it becomes a PUD. So turn it over to you. Just tell us who you are. And
Thank you. My name is Ryan Badger. I'm with ADR and Associates. We're the consultant, the engineering consultant for Mr. Landis on this project. As you stated, this is a PUD application requesting that we change from an R2 zoning to a PUD. What this allows us to do is kind of tighten things in and kind of develop the 17 acres in a more structured manner with lots that are more similar to what's to the north of us. And the idea right now is we kind of have two options. One with all single family residential homes. There's 54, I believe. And then there's an option of splitting that so that we have 36 residential single family homes and then 28 condos. It says multifamily, but we are specifying condos, not apartments, just to kind of clear that up. I guess with that's kind of a quick overview of what we're going submitted. We have gotten a little bit of feedback from the village, and we've modified the plan slightly to accommodate some of the questions so far. I know we'll probably have more. So I guess I'm here with Mr. Landis to answer any questions that you may have, concerns.
just real quickly then, since we're now in the recorded part of the meeting, what
Sure.
were, because I know the map up here that I have is a little bit older and has changed. What, and again, tonight is just the zoning change, but what's some of the changes that we've made so far?
It actually hasn't been a whole lot. We were asked to look at making a connection at the right-of-way location next to the church. Right there on the northwest corner of our little leg there, right where your cursor is.
Right in here?
Yeah, there's existing right-of-way that comes down into our property. And we were asked to look at connecting that. That kind of serves two purposes. One, it kind of spreads traffic volume out because we do understand we're increasing the volume, but it does allow more loop road situation where you have people coming from different directions, not all concentrated in one location. It also allows for emergency vehicles to be able to get into the development in multiple locations instead of, just in this case, we would end up with 3 with this scenario of adding that connection point. I think we added some landscaping that we didn't have on the original plan to show how we would buffer between developments for the condominiums to the residential. We modified a couple of utilities. I know we're not here talking about utilities, but there were some early questions that we dealt with Tim regarding the water line and how to loop it, take care of making sure we continue to have good service for that.
And so you mentioned, I don't know, we've seen some of the plans. So you guys you're well into the design development phase of the process to be able to answer some of these questions and to move forward if this is granted.
Yeah, we need to dip our toes into it enough to be confident that we had a feasible site that could be served by utilities, stormwater handled like it needs to be, etc. So yeah, we've done enough background work to be comfortable with what's being proposed.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions for Mr. Badger? Okay.
Well, one of the tenets of the PUD is normally there's an open space, which would be like a natural common area. And that's something I don't see on the plans at all. Was that, is that something that you just have to decide where to go, or is it something that we're omitting, or what's the,
Yeah, the current plan does not show any of that. We have had some conversations with Terry and the village about that. It's not necessarily 100% required with the PUD, so we're kind of proposing not to. A lot of that has to do with who's going to maintain it, you know, and that seems to be a big challenge in a lot of places. Is, you know, you have this open space, but you know, what do you do with it? Who's going to maintain it?
right?
Keep it safe, etc.
Mayor, can I say something?
Yes.
Okay, so all of the things that we were talking about is part of the preliminary phase, and we have just started working on that. So what you're showing here are some comments from our engineering company, which has also been looking at these. So some of these questions will be more applicable for the next time we meet on the preliminary drawings or the preliminary plan. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
It does. So Terry, then from the village side,
Yes.
and I know we'll hear from visitors in a moment, but
Correct.
as the zoning administrator,
Mhm.
do you have any issues, concerns, or are you good with recommending this zoning change?
I am good recommending the zoning change based on the fact it's the best use of the land and the best use of the land for the village. I find this engineering company and Mr. Landis very easy to work with. They're answering every question that we have, and as we continue to move forward, I think this will be beneficial to everyone in the village.
All right.
Thanks, Terry.
Mayor, you correct me if I'm not asking the right question at the right time,
Okay.
okay? We're in a neighborhood that's zoned R2. And according to the notations that I'm seeing on the lot layout, it stated that none of them would be less than 8,000 square feet, which is larger than R3's minimum, but considerably smaller than an R2. And is that something we would work out later as we move into? Or is that a viable question to ask now? I guess that's my.
No, it's a good question to ask now. It's something that can be more addressed later, but it's a good question now. One of the things you do though, when you go into a into a PUD is that strict R2 designation doesn't always apply at that point. If it were to stay in R2 and they wanted to develop it, like I mentioned earlier, they'd have to do a whole bunch of lot splits, and then each one would have to meet the minimum requirements of an R2. By doing a PUD, there are inherent deviations in there, but that's why the preliminary plat comes back to this committee for determination. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm in keeping with the tone of the neighborhood.
Mhm.
I was looking for kind of something that would carry over.
Yeah.
And also we talked about groundwater displacement, and I, was concerned about what could be built on a smaller lot and still meet those requirements.
Yeah,
So that's what I was
'cause-
thinking of ahead.
And I don't know that it's in this actual PUD, but in others, you can, depending on how they lay them out, and I'm thinking of a development in New Albany where you could go from what's essentially our R1s all the way down to an R3 size lot and have condos, which is the multifamily lots, all within one PUD design. And again, it just gives the flexibility to the developer. But the village gets that's why we get the preliminary to determine maybe we want the lots a little bigger, a little smaller and
That's
stuff.
discussion further down the road.
That goes
That is
in with,
correct.
that
Yeah.
goes in with the preliminary design. However, I have a feeling they're listening to what you're saying and are going to make sure all of the lots are appropriate because a lot of work goes into the preliminary plat designs and stuff. So,
Okay, I didn't want to neglect to ask, refer to that,
oh no.
but I
And-
didn't
and-
want to overstep where we're at.
And because this is the first time since I've been mayor that we've had one of these, and who knows when the last one was, it's a good question to bring up because we haven't done
We're
this yet.
learning. It's a learning experience. So
yes.
the houses on Cliff Street were not a planned unit development. They were just,
No.
That
No.
is correct.
okay. I was trying to understand the difference.
Yep.
Okay,
The difference is they fell within the required setbacks and limitation, and it was less than 5 acres.
Good question.
Yes, very good.
Other questions at this time for Mr. Badger? Or we can make Robert come up too.
I kind of have just like a procedural question,
Uh-huh.
I guess, around the plan unit development. So at this meeting, we're just gathering information. We're not actually like voting on anything. Like after this meeting, we schedule the public hearing
Yes,
and then we vote
right.
whether it can be rezoned to a planned unit development.
Right, because and kind of like our zoning code changes, if based on what you hear tonight, the committee says we're not in favor of this, it gives them an opportunity to make those revisions and then come back again, public hearing at a future date to receive additional public input. But that way it's, yeah. And I will probably, so that we can keep this process moving along, if the committee, says, yes, we're good with everything, let's proceed. I'll probably have Terry and Barb tomorrow look at the calendar for January to get the public hearing scheduled so we can keep this moving along.
Right.
The holidays delay a little bit, but that way we can keep it moving so they can keep moving along. Because again, they'll be back with the preliminary plat designs.
Well, I guess, again, maybe it's a procedural question, but, basically we're collecting information on this, but we're also forming an opinion of whether we want to approve this going to PUD. I'm just not sure how we can make that judgment if we don't really know what the final plan is. And that's where this is my first go around here as well, so.
It's kind of procedural, and I can see that. I think it's on one hand, I see where you say, I don't know that I want to go to this until I know what the final plan is. But at the same time, you switch it, that plan could conceivably change a little bit between now and then. It's only once they submit the final plan that it becomes what they have to do.
Okay.
The cost of doing the final plan is, in most cases, a lot larger than just changing. And so developers that I know and zoning stuff like this, I've been involved in the past, they don't want to do the site plan for the development until they know they have the PUD zoning down to be able to do it.
Okay. So again, question on my part, I'm not familiar that much with this process. So if we were to approve this, it still has to stay within all of our guidelines set in the zoning code.
Right. Well, the PUD guidelines are in 1268, I believe.
Yes.
And as you were saying that, another thing did pop into my head that I know. So your concern is you get this and stuff, and I don't think it's out of bounds. In fact, I wrote the opinion for the judge a decade ago on it, to be able to say, if you don't break ground, if you don't submit your plan, get it approved and break ground within X number of years, and in that case, it was 5 years, it reverts back to the R2 zoning.
Right.
Yeah.
That way it doesn't stay a PUD ad nauseum. It reverts back to the R2 if you don't do something.
Right.
And that'll hold Robert's feet to the fire to make sure it gets done.
This is 2 years.
If I could add, going back to your concern, your questions, what we did with Mr. Landis was go through your codes for the R2 and the R3 and the R1 and say, okay, what can we do with today's climate? What type of house are people looking for? What's selling? What size lot? What size house on a size lot? And that's kind of what we do. We kind of grab different aspects of different codes that you already have in place to come up with our proposed, our planned unit district. So we're trying to stay within your parameters, but kind of customize it to what we feel the development would best suit property.
Okay.
Right.
I had another question on the zoning amendment application. It's under number 2, a copy of any deed restrictions, easements, covenants, and encumbrances to be imposed to control. Those were to be turned in to you, I'm assuming, Terry?
Yes,
And were there any turned in?
not yet. No, I have not received any.
Okay,
There were not any, however, and Robert might be better capable of
Yes,
answering this,
yes.
but I understand after meeting with some of the residents, he is considering some to make
Okay.
sure. You want to pop up microphone? And so again, we have this meeting, application could be supplemented for the public hearing, but why don't you fill us in on what the deed restrictions?
Yeah, so I had to sit down with some of the local residents around there to hear, their concerns. And one of the main ones was a fear that the development can change. And especially if I were to sell the property, what would the next builder do per se? So, and the biggest concern that it seemed to come out of that was a change to apartments. And I said that I would be willing to put a deed restriction in, not allowing apartments if that was something that was needed. I don't have any problem doing that because I don't want apartments back there either. The other thing we talked about was the traffic on Tremont. And that's where we kind of, for a later meeting really, but we've changed it to allow for the 3 entrances instead of the 2 to help alleviate that as well.
okay.
Cool. And Ken, to go back to your question a minute ago, 1268.10, I think Mr. Looney brought it up. It's 2 years
Right.
per our code, that if hasn't done, then an extension has to be granted, and otherwise the replat goes for the plat, the PUD plat. You can always add the condition that it reverts to the R2 if the PUD expires.
Does it also follow the owner? Like if it changed to a PUD and it's sold, would it revert back to R2 or it stays a PUD?
It would stay a PUD. The time remains. So if it changes to a PUD and 18 months down the road, Robert sells it, the land, the new owner would have 6 months to break ground. And they would either have to follow his approved PUD or file a new one. So that time doesn't get extended by that.
I think maybe residents could take some comfort in this 126809 where it says modifications to an approved plan. Because I think if you change to apartments, that would be a significant modification.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I assume I would probably hit a roadblock in this room when that happened,
Yeah.
which would be understandable,
We need that in our community.
but not there.
Well, in working with children at school, housing is an issue for some of our families.
Yeah.
So I understand that need, but I like the existing plans that you have come up with. And
Thank you.
Interestingly enough, the opinion I wrote, which went up on appeal and was upheld, so little humble brag there, had to do with the development plan that went from condos to apartments, and then eventually went back to condos, and then they tried to go back to apartments. So it does happen, but I mean, if Robert adds a deed restriction,
That's forever.
Yeah, that's forever. He would be the only one that could undo the deed restriction. But that helps. And again, back to your point, under our code, that would be a major change subject to a public hearing and public feedback.
I personally think it's a good location. It was actually maybe not planned exactly that way, but it was thought out, the way the roads are laid out for those to be extended. I guess my only concern is just the fact that I would like to see a little bit of green area, but with the school right there, I don't know if that's a deal breaker.
And again, that part comes when we get to the final plat
Right.
design, or preliminary, I should
Right.
say.
I'm sorry.
So, does anybody else have questions for them at the moment? If not, what I would like to do is, we've got some residents in here and online, give them an opportunity to speak. So, excuse me, hear what they have to say, ask questions, and then have Robert, Mr. Badger, then maybe address those concerns.
I have one other question.
Uh-huh.
In our zoning code, it refers to homeowners or condominium owners association. Would there be such a thing, or would there be any reason to have that?
For the condos, there would be.
Okay.
There'd be a condo association.
Okay.
Yep.
And again, I'm an old single family household guy. What does something like that entail? I don't know. I mean, what does that cover? I mean, what do they do?
The condo association?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Typically, since I lived in one for quite a while, it covers your exterior maintenance.
Okay,
Because from a condo, you only really own from the drywall in. The structure, your roof, landscaping, grass cutting, maintenance of your roadways and driveways, that's all covered under your condo association. And there's a fee typically that you can pay for that stuff. So everybody throws money in the pot, things get taken care of.
okay, so
There's also other things in there about what you can and can't do on the exterior of your unit, so that it can keep some consistency and not have people building on or excessive yard items. Some people like to decorate their yard a little bit more than others, but in a condo association, you like to normally keep that because it's all considered open space, common area.
okay.
That's what's in those documents
What
typically.
about the garage door? Do you
So,
have any looking into
well,
it?
it's like lawn maintenance.
Yeah.
Typically, who's responsible for that? The owner of the property then?
The association.
Okay, so who owns the property? The association then? Because if the owners only own drywall in, who owns the ground? Who owns the land?
That is a great question. I'm drawing a blank, to be honest with you. It's when you do a condo plat, you're platting the land around the condo, because you can plat, condos development can be platted in multiple plats instead of one, depending on how you're gonna phase the construction. It still incorporates, so you kind of own it, but it's all maintained and controlled by the association. So when I say you own inside, you're still part of that exterior to a certain degree, but it also falls back down on the condo association. So, and I believe they might actually hold some type of, like where they're responsible for any taxes for the outside area. But again, it's been a while since I've looked
Yeah,
at the
usually the association it is a recognized entity, and they hold the rights and responsibilities for that common area. So outside the back door of your condo, you might have a little yard that is yours, but the association, whoever they hire to do the ground maintenance, is going to mow that when they come through once a week. Because you might have a condo, the backs are backed up, you got a little bit of yard, and then a lot of times there's green space in between them, and it's like a communal backyard. You got your little area for your grill and kids' toys, and then an area in between the buildings that is green space for them. And the
Yeah.
association then hires the maintenance and contractors to mow.
Yeah, when you look at a residential plat, you see your property line, and your house is within the property line. You own all the way up to your property line. You maintain and everything's your responsibility within that. Condo, you kind of have a boundary of what your plat says your unit's in, but you're still only responsible for what's inside the unit, not outside. And that's when the association has that overlap to take care of the rest.
Well, and I know this has nothing to do with the zoning change, but I'm
No,
curious,
you're
okay?
fine.
No.
So when you buy a condo unit, is there anything in the auditor's office that says you own part of this piece of
Yes.
ground?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so it actually says you own part of that ground.
Well, it says you own that part of that building.
Yeah.
You own that unit in that building. You don't necessarily own the ground. You, as an owner in the building, you have the rights to use that ground.
Okay. And again, I'm just curious, who owns the ground?
So
The association.
The
Okay.
Association.
Okay, so,
and what typically I see happening is you create, I'll create the language, and then as the units get bought, they'll actually elect a board that then will control, i.e. the association. Now, you hire associations to actually manage the property, but then the board of the actual residents will elect to, maybe change fees accordingly if they see a desire to, I don't know, we get a quote and the lawn maintenance goes up and that's not within the budget range. Okay, we got to increase our fees. That board then makes those elections for the entire establishment. So they even though they only own the inside, they're still controlling the outside.
okay.
But you're not asking all 30
Yeah.
people to decide
Well, yeah, I guess
Right.
how to do that.
I'm just not familiar with this personally, so I'm
Yeah.
trying to
It's-
learn a little bit as we go.
It's a homeowners association or a New York City building co-op on a smaller scale.
Sure.
Except in New York City, the members on the co-op board can deny a buyer.
True.
They do not have to say why.
So,
We got one of those.
all right.
It's wrong committee probably, but I mean, obviously, I would like to publicly say that Tremont, I don't know where it's scheduled within the paving aspect of things. Obviously, after this project is done, and it already needs it now. Obviously, after this is done, it's probably definitely gonna need it. So I don't know who I need to come in front of to ask that maybe it gets expedited to the top of the list after the project's done.
Or incorporated into your project.
Well,
Well, when you say that, I have to ask, are you anticipating the construction traffic deteriorating the road more? Or what?
Well, construction traffic is something to be figured out. But I know with the increase in vehicular traffic, just residents, it will change the road.
Right, well,
It's already in bad condition.
and what I'm getting at is,
don't fix it before I'm done.
right, what I'm saying is, you come back over with a Landau with a big excavator on it. Those roads were never designed to carry semis,
Right. The plan, if I could say something, the plan for Tremont is that what Mr. Landis just said, not to do any repairs or anything at this current time, just because we know of what's going to be going on over there. But then after the major portion of the construction is done, then this road or street will be put into the mix with the other listing of streets that need to be repaved.
And quite frankly, a development back there
Right.
may improve our points allotment on grant applications
Sure.
because it's a new development and it's now servicing more people, and that could help us get a grant.
It
To-
will,
to-
improve, yes.
Yeah,
it
to
will.
be able to do it sooner than we could if we're just doing it on our own dime.
Correct.
All right.
All right.
Questions at the moment? If not, tell you what, we've got two inside here, and I think there was, last I looked, there might have been 4 online. We'll check in a minute. So we'll do the residents that are physically present with us first, if they have anything, and then we'll flip to the those that are on Zoom if they have anything to say. So either one of you two that are here, we'll just ask you to come up, give us your name and address.
My name
And
is-
normally we try to keep them like 3 to 5 minutes, but it,
Fine.
you know, if we go over a little bit, we'll go over a little bit, but not too much.
Okay,
right.
Mr. Landis has answered a lot of our questions since this all began. The roads are, oh, Joyce Blosser,
And your address?
113 Tremont.
Okay.
So my house is right next to the church where this map does not show it, but now he's proposing to open up right next to Christ United. I don't know if they've been notified about that, because it's a very, very high traffic area already with the preschool and just constant activities, weddings, you know, you name it, there's a lot going on in that area. For my own thing, I live right next to that. When the church built the big building that is now on Christ United like 15 years ago, it really, yes, it really increased the traffic. And they also have a parking issue, you know, there at that church. But anyway, I wanted to bring that up, that is, I know he's trying to save Tremont because there was only the entrance from Dorchester and Tremont. Now, also, he's going to open up Circle Drive, and I'm going to tell you that the construction traffic will use brand new Dorchester to get over to Circle Drive. I can't really see them going all the way around.
Well, the beauty about construction traffic is they go where we tell them.
Okay.
That's why you see on the construction sites, construction entrance only, and then no construction
So
traffic.
you could keep them off the new Dorchester if you needed to.
If we needed to, yes.
Okay.
As long as there is a way to get back there, I can't guarantee that if keeping them off of Dorchester doesn't mean they go down Tremont. I don't know
Oh, they'll
because
have to use Tremont.
but
There's no other way
the,
back.
you know, I don't know if there's another way back there or if there's sometimes temporary construction, you know, they lay a bed of gravel across the field to be able to get in. I don't know, but I'm part of our plan, and I know Terry will be on top of it, is trying to, and I'm sure Robert will too, is try to minimize the construction traffic through the residential area.
And Joyce,
during
that
that time.
might be where we research the easement between.
Could you speak up, okay?
We might want to come back and research that easement between Faith and Christ as a construction, right off of 158.
Yeah,
So,
the churches will have, they'll have to do that if they want to do that at all. I just want to make sure that the church was even notified. I know that some of the residents, well, nobody on the north side of Tremont was notified about this. And Terry, I spoke to Terry about this. She said she was only required to notify
continue.
people who abut to this property, but on the same token, all of us are going to be affected.
Mhm.
It's somewhat unfair to just say, you know, well, we follow the law, but you know, for good neighbors, I think more people should have been notified. Anyway, my other concern is the water. You know, we keep hearing how bad the water is and how everything needs to be upgraded. Our neighborhood is already 50 years old. I've been told by people that work for the water department that 50 years is when you need to start thinking about upgrading water systems. How is that going to tax our already now 50-year-old water system, adding that many more homes? So that's one of my concerns. I know you can't answer that today, but I also had concerns about the green space. They're going to be taking down a lot of trees, a lot of wildlife lives back there, deer. I've seen fox back there. They're going to be taking down a lot of trees. So that was one of my concerns. So that's about all I have to say. And I like knowing that this is just the very first meeting and there'll be more, and hopefully I can attend.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Next.
I'm Patrick Quinn. I live 100 Tremont Drive, right across from the church. My concern is, wow, that's a lot of traffic in the neighborhood. Sure, they're gonna open up Circle Drive now. That's a good deal. But they're gonna use Dorchester, they're going to use Tremont, they're gonna use Circle Drive. It's a lot of kids out in that area. It's a lot of construction traffic. It's gonna be a mess. Which is all right, it'll rain, it'll go away. But isn't there an easement between the two churches going out to Main Street? If a new road can be put in there? To access all of this going on back here, let alone wouldn't that be a lot simpler for them to come in to get into this new annex for the whole project, 17 acres, even if they live there? That's what I
Yes, but-
ask.
Okay. I don't know if there's an easement, and if there is, I don't know who owns it or what it's
I don't
for,
know who owns
or
it. I just know that.
or
there
what
was
it's
an
for and
original-
who owns
I
it.
just know it's a mud hole
Yeah.
now. It's gonna be the same, like I said, because it's all wetland back in that anyway, so. But that was, like I say, it seems like it's a great idea. They did open up another entrance into it. But as far as the fire department, police department, dog catchers, seemed like it'd be a lot easier of an entrance all for itself coming off Main Street back into it. Instead of having to wind around all through the city side. Okay?
All right. Thank you. Let me stop sharing this. And that's all that's present here. So we'll go over to Zoom. I'll let the people on Zoom know that the last two people that spoke here in person, I did see pens writing from the engineer back here on the concerns as well. So even though you can't see them, they are taking notes. I see 3 people up on Zoom. If anybody has any comments, we'll just ask you to unmute and tell us who you are, and questions, concerns, comments, and the floor would be yours.
Joe Taylor, 132 Tremont Drive. And I appreciate Mr. Landis meeting with us on Saturday and kind of going through the whole situation. And I think most of the residents along that drive were pretty much against apartments, not so much against condominiums. I myself kind of like the idea of condominiums, but I think for the most part, my concern would be the street, the infrastructure of Tremont, specifically the sub base of the drive, and the condition that it's going to take with 60 to 80,000 pounds of traffic continuously for possibly 54 lots or more. I think that it's going to take a beating. The street's going to pump up and down and make it possibly impassable. But overall, I'm not against the change from the R2 to the PUD. I think a lot of it makes sense, and I appreciate Mr. Malger's looking into the 20%, I think what it was for the PUD of the open space. I think there's some fluctuation there to make some bike paths. I'm not sure if that is a storm easement that the village may own going back to the storm basin, but I think there's a possibility to tie in Dorchester/Tremont to the land lab area. I think that would be a great opportunity. But for the most part, I'm just here to watch and kind of overview this. And my biggest concern is the infrastructure and making sure that the money that is invested into this project, or the money that the village receives from this project, goes back to the infrastructure of the area affected, if that makes sense.
It does. I appreciate it. Thank you, Joe.
Joe's a member of Faith. Joe, can you hear me?
Yes, Kay, I can hear you.
Okay. Do you remember us ever discussing an easement between Christ and Faith?
Yes, I don't think it was an easement. If I remember right, Kay, there was discussion about the expansion of the church, expansion of the parking lot, and the two churches aligning a street to gain that access with counter. or in other words, making an access off of 158 to align with Counter instead of more traffic coming in and out of our church. But I think this would have been back probably prior to 2009, maybe 2010 area.
Okay, so I was right in that it was discussed at one point.
Yes. I
Okay.
spoke with Art this past weekend about the stormwater and how they set the catch basins and took it to the east and then the south along that big that storm line that goes down to the retention area there closer to Land Lab.
All right. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else on Zoom have a comment?
Hi, this is Mike Marr, 140 Tremont Court. My concern of all this, and I'm all for development, whether it be condos or single-family homes, but in 2012, the area where I live in, probably a half dozen neighbors' homes were reclassified in a flood zone. And my concern is that as I look at the field behind my home, right now I could walk out there and see water standing. So if this is developed and built up, what is it going to do for my home and the area and my neighbors as far as a flood zone? Are we going to have more drainage problems coming in because of the development in this area? That's the only comment I have.
Okay, that is a good question. I see them writing notes down about it in the back. And I don't know that I have an answer for that right off the top of my head either on a barrier between regular development and flood zone areas. So again, this is the first meeting. So I know I've got it written down. I saw them writing it down. So at the next meeting, hopefully you can join and we will have at least something to be able to report on that. And I'm seeing the engineer in the back shake his head that yes, at the next meeting, we should have something to report on that.
We've got an engineer on file.
Yep.
I feel safe.
Yep. So anything else, Mike?
Nothing from my standpoint. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, I think that was it online. Does anybody on the committee have any questions? Robert, Mr. Badger, if you guys want to make any comments based on what you've heard tonight, feel free.
The only thing I would. This is Robert Landis. The only thing I would say is the engineering firm will definitely address the stormwater. We're going to be required by the village when that time comes to have the appropriate size stormwater, make sure we can handle all of the runoff. And we've already started working on that project with Terry and Tim as well. So we're very aware of stormwater and working on how we can handle that.
Yeah. So Mr. Marr's concern is addressed as part of the preliminary plat that gets designed and you're working on it.
Correct.
That's good to hear. All right. Let me. Anybody on the committee have any further questions?
One question I have, I think that the engineer that reviewed the plans asked the question if this is going to be built to connect to DK homes in the future? Like the Circle Drive, is it?
Yeah. The connection of extending the Circle Drive out.
The sewer and the,
That was just
Yeah.
that was just a notation. That's not really a part of this project itself. But we did duly note that Circle Drive could possibly do that. But it's not a part of this project.
So I think what you're looking at is of course, they submitted that, and then our village engineer, we sent this to them for their initial comments as well, and that was one of theirs, just questions.
Yes.
And we've gone through those questions, and we've actually kind of looked into some of what they made bullet points on. So that whole stormwater thing is a concern from everybody, including us. As Mr. Ryan said, we do have to follow the village regulations on that. So, and I did make plenty of notes. We'll look into some of those concerns. Obviously, if it's off-site, there's not a lot, we don't really have a lot of control what's happening off-site, but as far as what we're doing, we'll make sure we're responsible for how that's handled.
All right. Any other questions from the committee? Is there anybody based on what we've heard that is not ready or is not comfortable with moving to the next step of this process, which is having the public hearing scheduled on this? Again, I would expect our residents and maybe even more at that point, because the notifications go out a little broader on the public hearing side to open up. But is there anybody that is not comfortable with moving to the next step at this point?
do we need a motion to move to a public hearing?
Sure, why not?
I move that we take this project onto the public hearing stage.
All right,
I would second that.
all right. Any discussion on that? All right, roll call.
Miss Williamson,
Yes,
Mr. Mager,
Yes,
Mr. Looney,
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes. All right, so we will send this to a public hearing. Terry, I know you're still kind of remote and Barb's in the office
Right.
a few hours. But if you guys could start to maybe look at a calendar for early January. Let me ask my residents here, at a public hearing, would you expect more people to come? Because we're still trying to keep space and stuff like that. I'm just trying to figure out if I need to try to schedule this upstairs in the Opera House, or if here would be sufficient.
I really have no idea.
Okay,
would say.
I will go ahead and do the Opera House, Mayor,
okay,
just so that we can accommodate anybody that wants to attend and still be within the health guidelines.
okay. So,
now, I will state that we are having issues with the heating system there. It's working part way, but not completely. It's not gonna be below freezing, but I cannot guarantee it's gonna be toasty Florida weather.
dress
Well-
warm.
Yes.
We'll dress
That-
warm.
that will also help keep comments short and directly to the point.
Germs under control.
Yeah, there we go.
All right, so yeah, if you guys could look at some dates, coordinate with Steve and the BDRC to make sure it's available, and then of course us on the committee.
Absolutely.
Unless you guys just want to maybe schedule it as our January meeting.
No, not that you need me to be there, but I will be unavailable for our next plan meeting. I will be out of the area.
We
Okay.
have YouTube access you could watch.
Yeah.
Would you like that YouTube plug?
Yeah, you're making vacation work time here.
Fair enough. But again, after the public hearing. So, okay, so Terry, yeah, if you could just circulate
Yes.
some dates, maybe we'll
will.
find out when Ken's on vacation, and that way we can all be there, because it is important.
It is important,
If-
yes,
If
I
we
will get-
can, but I don't want it to go out too late so that we can keep it moving so that, I don't know. When do you want to break ground?
I think we're a little bit
A little bit.
Yeah.
away from that. So I will
We're-
work on that with Barb first thing in the morning in my meeting with her and send out a request to everyone. So
Sounds good. All right, we still have some business. You guys are welcome to stick around for the rest of the meeting if you want.
I don't know. I don't think Robert Paul has a pond plan.
Yeah. If not,
Thanks, Terry.
we'll wait a minute while
welcome.
our background noise rustles out.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everyone, for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, while
Yes.
everybody's moving around, so my question to you is, do you mind if I get off the call
Now, go ahead. You got
because
stuff
of
going
my
on.
circumstances?
Yep, you're
If you
good.
don't mind.
You're good.
Thank you, committee, and I'll be getting you some information as soon as possible, and I apologize for having to skip
Thanks,
out.
guys.
Not a problem. Stay well, dear.
Thank you.
All right. So our next item was ponds, continued pond discussion.
And I noticed that vehicles is still on here. I thought at the last meeting, Terry said she met with and that we could take that off.
Yeah, I think we just need to take that off.
Okay, because I thought the discussion was that the issue of concern for her was resolved.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't get that in before she disappeared, but, okay,
So,
so,
I mean, it's 8 o'clock. We had a lot. We can talk ponds more. Quite frankly, I personally, I've looked at some ponds, but I didn't sit down and compare what I was looking at to what our discussion was last time in our notes. I mean, and okay, you and I talked about the one at the old Timber Top on Columbus Street in
Right.
Lancaster and theirs.
man,
And
that is
um,
big.
I looked, speaking of condos, a family member of mine used to live in condos they built in Blacklick 20 years ago when they were just developing out east of Reynoldsburg, New Albany Road. And I drove by there the other day, and right across from the Straders, there's a new giant, I assume it's an apartment complex going in there, and they have a big pond dug in front. I don't know if it's technically a retention or a detention or how it's going to be designed, but they have one. I assume it's going to be a pond. They're still building and stuff, but like I said, I haven't compared those that I've looked at in other communities to our notes and tried to figure it out yet.
Now, does Lancaster not have any regulations? Because I have driven into Lancaster going down 188, and there's a housing development that has one, and it's in the corporation limit. And I was like, well, how do I find out?
So I know, well, Lancaster has a fairly extensive zoning code. If I know which one you're talking about, that one might have actually been outside of the city proper when it was built and later annexed in.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
As well.
Okay.
So that could also be a factor with that one.
Now, what's the planned unit development on the timber, what's that site called?
Timber Peg on Columbus Street. Yeah. I believe those are ranch
Because there's a big
condos.
building going in.
I think I haven't looked at it closely. I know it was kind of controversial when it was going in down there. I want to say it's ranch condos and then that's a clubhouse,
Okay.
but I'm not exactly for sure what it is.
Okay.
I know residents of Lancaster objected to annexing it in, as well as the clearing of all the trees that they did. So, but obviously it annexed in, and they cleared all the trees. So. But
It was interesting to have the conversation with Mr. Foreman and realize that evidently there are rather strict guidelines if it's a commercial property on the release of water from your site's creation of runoff. And I didn't realize that his is totally underground. So if it's for detaining the water to disperse it in a proper, safe manner, it doesn't necessarily have to be a pond. So. But
It's
then there's
interesting.
also do we want to call it the landscape pond?
Right.
So,
Right.
but, so the safety is my concern.
Yeah. So we do have a little bit of time with ponds because council did
Give us a moratorium.
pass the moratorium.
Well, that was what, 6 months though?
6 months.
Okay.
So we got from November 8th. So we have until May 8th. And it was what we said, construction of ponds, and it was pretty wide open. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Now, I also noticed in the note from Terry that we received today on the update of our previous lot split, that earth could be moved without the EPA permission. And with the pipeline, their website says that they must be asked permission
Yes.
to move. I mean, it gave the site, it said even to plant a bush.
Now, I did notice a culvert sitting out there. I don't know.
That's been there for some time.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't get out of Baltimore very often, okay?
I go that way a lot.
Yeah.
So that's been there for some time.
Okay, so that's nothing new then.
Nothing new.
Okay.
So, but could lead you to believe what might
Right.
be to come,
An
even though,
entrance of some sort.
yeah,
Yes.
even though the statement was made that it was contracted for.
Now, I did have one, no, I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you.
Go right ahead.
Here on the surveyor's map, on that, the Keck Woods lot split here.
Okay.
This and the corresponding notes here, should have circled it, but somewhere it's talking about 10 point something acres. And I'm trying to figure out where that, here it is, on the description of the 2.955 acre, the written out description of it.
Okay.
They're talking about east distance of whatever, this is the fourth paragraph down, of the 10.5 acre tract. Now, is that a different tract? Or what is that 10.5 acres refer to?
So the 10.5 acres, the 2.955 acres was part of the 10.5 acre tract that was in that prior deed reference that it has there. So that, if I'm looking at the map,
I'm trying to figure out what that deed is, that deed reference is though. Some, it says it here at the bottom, underneath where it says the individual acres for these two lots. I'm just kind of lost there.
so 683, 592. So originally, and again, I'm just going to go based off looking at that, where it says it was the 2.955 came out of that 10 acre lot, and then looking at that deed reference, if you look at the prior deed reference, well, if you look at the drawing and you see where it has the size of the two lots, and then below it, it says deed reference.
Right.
And then it has volume 683, page 592, 10.5 acres originally.
Mhm.
So that 4.7 acre lot and that 2.9 acre lot, and then
Kevin King.
Kevin King's probably came out of that. Or someone else's. So-
Bought from Roger.
Well, the point is at some point, all of the land was
Was
one
together.
tract, and then it gets separated out and deeded out and deeded out and smaller
Okay,
lots.
So that could go back many moons.
It could go back
Okay.
many moons.
Okay, so this isn't just from the previous deed change, and this can go back much further back.
Correct.
Okay, that I understand then, because the math just wasn't working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So yes, they got a letter. They can't move dirt without a construction permit.
Okay.
Without permission from EPA.
Right.
Because I was surprised it wasn't permission from the company that owns the gas line.
Well, it'd be from whoever they need to get. The big one that we were concerned with was the EPA.
Okay. They take precedence.
In this case, I'm gonna go yes.
Okay. So back to my, okay, Lancaster has ponds.
Uh-huh.
How would I access information about ponds in Lancaster? So I would go to their website.
I would look in their zoning code, which is available on their website. I think Lancaster's will actually take you to a Walter Drain website to bring it out, but yeah, Lancaster's zoning code is on the website. And so if they have ponds, I would imagine it would be in there. Part of the zoning code would be the subdivision regulations. Ponds could be in there. And those are the only two places I could think of off the top of my head. I mean, that is the logical place for the pond stuff to be.
I suppose I could call the city offices and bother someone to ask them more specifically, but I was trying to
Yeah,
not be too intrusive.
yeah. I would say if it's not in the zoning code and not in the subdivision regulations on the website, then a phone call is probably warranted.
Okay. I'll see what I can find out.
All right.
Yeah, I did not look at any additional pond information.
I haven't had a lot of time,
Yeah.
so. What was our concern with driveways? Or were we talking about whether they were counted as for drainage or lot coverage?
I think it was a little bit of that. There was a question about requirements to pave them in our subdivision regulations when doing a new build. And I forget, there was one other issue, and I don't know if this is related to that, because sometimes my issues all get confused. But one person in the one lot left on Cliff Street didn't want to put their house in line with all of the others
Oh, my.
because the driveway would be too long. And they wanted to bring it right up a lot closer to the road.
Hmm.
I think Terry got that fixed.
I did notice on Cliff Street, there are an awful lot of gravel driveways over there on new builds. And that's actually a concern of mine because I think that's specifically stated in our, our code that on a new construction, it's supposed to be a paved.
It's supposed to be paved, and that might be some of the concern. We build a house on well, even mine's a little long, but on a regular lot here, you're looking at maybe a 20-foot driveway. Blacktop on 20-foot driveway, 2 car widths or 1 car width. It's manageable. But on the ones on Cliff Street, you're going back
Probably
80 to 100
Right.
feet, 1 or 2 car widths
200.
or 200 feet.
okay.
And the cost becomes
Exorbitant.
Right.
But the
considerably more.
The code
Yeah.
actually doesn't say that the whole driveway has to be paved or concrete or whatever. That was, if this is on there because of the question I had for Terry, that was, I guess, my point. Like, I don't want to say perspective because like, it's clearly in the code that your off-street parking has to be paved and you have to do a concrete sidewalk and the apron has to be concrete, which I know none of the houses on Cliff Street, including mine, don't have that yet. And I
Oh,
was,
sidewalk,
yeah.
right.
But as far as like paving the entire driveway, that's not in the code.
And that might be why. Was it meant to be everything, or is it what needs to change? But at the same time, if the idea was to do it, did we consider a 200-foot driveway versus a 20-foot driveway?
Right.
Right. So I think it's one of those things. So what Terry's done on the agenda is, as these issues come up for us to discuss, she puts them on there, and then, the pressing ones, we get moved to the top, and these others that we need to discuss, we come up.
But yeah, it would be, because we would need to address that in the PUD.
Well, in the PUD is a little different, but yeah,
Are all the driveways gonna be paved?
that is a question. And that, again, with the PUD and the development plan, that makes it there's a little more control there.
And she didn't share with, I think I alluded to, is her signage issue, all the flashing church signs, and she implied that that was not.
Our signage issue is a couple fold. One, signs that may or may not, signs in the right of way, old sign poles, and the fact that right after we did this zoning code, the United States Supreme Court pretty much shot down every sign ordinance in the United States. And so with regards to what you can and cannot permit, and so it needs to be looked at and just updated. And then there are other things with the sign code. For instance, I mentioned right-of-way signs and then permanent versus freestanding signs. I don't think our code specifically permits, and it might even prohibit, like freestanding signs in the right-of-way. However, we have a number of businesses just off the road, or in some cases, a couple blocks back. And I'm thinking of one in particular that I go buy all my rabbit feed from, that without a freestanding sign that they put out, someone driving by wouldn't know they exist. And so removing that actually hurts the business. In that area where that sign is, it's not necessarily a detriment. But if that business were further downtown and that sign were on the sidewalk, then we would have a problem. And so that becomes the issue.
Kind of catch-22.
Exactly. If you eliminate it, then we affect a business that it's not a problem. But if a business downtown wants to do it, it's a problem. And so how do we? So yeah, be consistent, promote the businesses and allow them to be able to do that, but also not, be
Yeah, I
consistent.
know, like the Lightbridge Church, they have one that they put out.
Mhm.
Otherwise, people wouldn't know where they are. And I can remember when,
Yeah.
before we had our church building, we would put one out would be on Sunday morning because we were meeting at the elementary school.
Right. And I think now church still comes and puts a little
Yeah, they have one
sandwich sign that they put at the corner here to point people down. And so, yeah, all sorts of interesting things with signs.
I would imagine we will have more at our public hearing. I am not a Facebook person, but evidently there was a lot of talk on Facebook,
Mhm.
the typical, not in my backyard.
Right. And that is why I think Robert saw that and had that meeting. He told me he spent about 2 hours with the residents that showed up. I think that's why he had that. So,
Well, being a farm girl, I don't like it when people like to tell farmers what they can and can't do with their property when they no longer want to
yeah.
use it for farming. And I don't think that's,
Yeah.
fair to, just because they're used to, buy the lot if you want to keep it in its present condition.
Yep.
So.
I mean, the farmer's retirement plan is to sell to a developer.
Right.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
So,
not making a lot of new farm ground.
Nope. But, all right. Is there anything else we want to hit on tonight?
no, I'll try and be more diligent about pond research. I was, like I said, I was looking to Lancaster because I've noticed, Rising Park is the pond, but
Right.
I noticed those others, they're going down 188, but yeah, I think you're right. If they have legislation, they were probably appropriate after that legislation
Yeah.
was initiated, so, but I'm always looking at it from the standpoint of safety
Yep.
and,
All right. So do I hear a motion to adjourn then?
We're all done. I'll make that motion.
All right.
I will second that motion.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All right. 4-0 unanimous voice vote. We will adjourn at 8:19. Last meeting of the year. Thank you, everybody. If I don't see anybody before then, it's a couple weeks out, but Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
Well, perhaps next week we have to Merry Christmas because that's the last week of school.
Yes.
So I was like, talking to my volunteers at the after-school program and saying, thank you.